My name is Emily Monroe, and my own sister made sure my parents missed the most important day of my life, my wedding. She smiled as she stole my moment, but what she didn't know was that I'd make sure she'd never forget it. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know. The clink of silverware echoed gently in the candle-lit dining room, mingling with the soft hum of cicadas outside our Atlanta home. It was one of those picture-perfect suburban evenings. Roast chicken, warm cornbread, and the illusion that we were a close family. I knew better. Dad poured another glass of wine, and Mom laughed at something Lauren said. Of course she did. Lauren always knew how to command attention, and I had mastered the art of blending into the wallpaper when she did. But tonight I came with news. News that, for once, might make their eyes turn to me. I raised my glass, about to propose a toast. That was my first mistake. Before the words could leave my mouth, Lauren leaned back in her chair with that familiar smirk and said far too loudly, "At 35, still single, huh?" Her voice rang out like a slap. Even Dad chuckled, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Mom gave me a pitying glance like I'd just been reminded of my expiration date. I kept my face composed. Years of training. I laughed softly, politely. I'm fine with that. I stabbed my fork into the mashed potatoes too forcefully. I didn't even like potatoes. What I wanted to say was, actually, I'm engaged. What I wanted was a moment that belonged to me. But I knew better than to give it to them when Lauren had the floor. She always knew where to dig. She did it with that casual cruelty, the kind that slinks under the skin before you realize you're bleeding. And the worst part, my parents never called it out. They just laughed along like her jokes were harmless, like I was being too sensitive. I looked at her across the table, blonde, bold, always basking in the golden glow of our parents' approval. Lauren could spill a glass of wine and somehow make it my fault. That night she didn't even spill anything, just my pride. Mom reached across the table to pass the peas and said, "Emily, sweetie, maybe it's time to consider a dating service. There are so many lovely people out there." I smiled, tight. My heart was pounding in my ears. I had a diamond ring in my purse. I glanced at Lauren, who was watching me, not the way a sister watches, the way a rival waits. She knew, I swear she knew. She could smell hope and was already sharpening her knife. "Maybe someday," I said. "Right now, I'm just enjoying life." They all nodded like I'd confessed to a crime. Dad went back to his plate. The moment passed. No one noticed the way my fingers clenched under the tablecloth or how my appetite vanished. Daniel's face flickered in my mind, his steady eyes, the way he kissed my forehead every morning before work, how he said, "You don't need them to approve, you need to live." But I had wanted this. For just once, I had wanted my family to look at me and see something to be proud of, to feel what it's like to be the favored one. Lauren laughed again, mouth full of bread, and said, "Maybe we should set you up with one of Dad's golfing buddies, someone who's got a good pension and doesn't mind cats." Everyone laughed. I smiled. Inside, I was already planning the moment I'd make them all choke on their words. Back at our apartment downtown, I dropped my purse on the hallway table and peeled off my heels with a sigh that came from somewhere deeper than exhaustion. Daniel looked up from the couch where he'd been reading, his face lighting up the way it always did when he saw me, like I was the entire room. "Hey, how was dinner?" he asked, setting his book aside. His voice was calm. He didn't know yet. I didn't answer right away. I walked straight into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window at the city lights, blinking like distant promises. I could feel the warmth of him behind me before he touched my shoulder. "She did it again," I said finally. My voice was low, but it vibrated with something brittle. Daniel didn't need to ask who. He just sighed and pulled me in by the waist until my forehead rested on his chest. "What now?" She waited until the exact moment I was about to speak, then made one of her classic jabs. This one was about me being 35 and still single. Daniel's jaw tightened. I could feel it in the set of his shoulders. "Let me guess," he said. "Your parents laughed." Like it was the punchline of the evening, I muttered. And I sat there, smiling like a coward. "You're not a coward," he said, softly but firmly. "You're just tired of screaming into a family that only hears one voice." That's when the tears came. Not heavy ones, just a few sliding down silently, more from frustration than sadness. He wiped one from my cheek and leaned down. Then let's give them a reason to pay attention. I looked up at him. He was serious. We invite them, properly, officially, both sides. A dinner where we announce our engagement on our terms, he said. We make it undeniable. Let them see who you are when you're not trying to shrink to fit their comfort. It sounded terrifying and perfect. That night, long after the city had quieted and Daniel had gone to bed, I sat at my desk and opened a blank page. I sketched out a design with wildflowers in the corners, delicate, intentional, just like I wanted the evening to feel. I ordered specialty envelopes in cream linen. I bought sprigs of dried lavender and chamomile and started hand-sealing each invitation with wax and twine. It was slow, meticulous work. It gave my anger somewhere to go. As I pressed one final flower into place, I whispered to myself, they can't ignore this. The next morning, I stood at the corner mailbox with the stack in my hands. The sun was still rising, the air just cool enough to make me pause before slipping them in. To Mom and Dad, to Lauren, to Daniel's parents, his uncle, his godmother. I let them fall in one by one like wishes. Back in the apartment, Daniel handed me a cup of coffee and kissed my shoulder. You sure you want to do this? I nodded. I want them to see me, really see me. He smiled. Then get ready because they're about to meet the real Emily. We spent the rest of the week preparing. I made seating charts, called the restaurant, picked a menu that blended both Southern comfort and Italian elegance. I wanted the evening to feel like the life we were building, rooted in kindness, touched by grace, and completely ours. Daniel's parents RSVP'd the next day. His mother even called to say how excited she was. Finally, she said, we get to properly meet the woman Daniel won't stop talking about. That made me blush. Then we waited. A few days passed, then 4, then 5. Finally, my phone rang. Lauren, I took a breath and answered. Hey, she chirped, sugar sweet. Those little invitations were adorable, Em, really precious. My stomach sank. Thanks, so are you all coming? There was a pause, just long enough to sting. We're not, actually. Mom and Dad said it's just not their kind of thing. I blinked. What do you mean, it's dinner, it's family? Lauren gave a small snort. Don't make it dramatic. My jaw clenched. I'm not making it anything. I just wanted to share something important with the people who claim to care about me. You always do this, she said, suddenly sharper. Act like you're the victim when no one's done anything to you. You think sabotaging my moment again is nothing? I asked, my voice shaking now. I didn't sabotage anything, she snapped. Maybe they just didn't want to sit through one of your handmade flower shows. It's weird, Em. You're weird. The call ended shortly after that, her voice rising, mine going quiet. That's how it usually ended between us. I stood there in the kitchen, phone still in hand, staring at the small pile of extra invitations I had saved. One had a tiny purple blossom glued slightly off-center. I had made that one for Mom. I remembered thinking she'd like the detail, but they never even saw them. Or maybe. They had, and someone made sure they didn't. I didn't cry that night, not right away. I washed the dishes in silence, the lavender-scented soap clinging to my fingers as if trying to remind me of the invitations I had poured myself into. Each one of them made by hand, pressed with hope, sealed with a prayer that maybe, this time my family would show up for me. But they didn't. They didn't even pretend to try. And Lauren, her voice rang in my ears long after the call ended. You're weird, Em. She said it like a punchline, but it landed like a curse. Daniel came in while I was drying the last plate. He didn't ask. He just wrapped his arms around me from behind. They're not coming, I whispered. He rested his chin on my shoulder. So we'll host it anyway, with the ones who do want to be there. I turned to face him. It won't be the same. No, he said gently, it'll be better because it'll be honest. There was something about the way he said that, like he wasn't just talking about dinner. Like he was talking about our whole future. A life not built on chasing approval or dancing around family politics, but on choosing what was real. Who was real? So we moved forward. I called the restaurant and confirmed the reservation, reduced the guest list, ordered a smaller cake. Daniel's parents would be there, and that was enough. The night of the dinner, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the silky fabric of a pale green dress that hugged my waist and flared softly at the knees. Daniel came out in a crisp shirt and navy jacket, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, like we were stepping into the future one deliberate step at a time. At the restaurant, the warm glow of hanging Edison bulbs made the room feel like a secret we were sharing. Daniel's parents arrived first, his mother in a coral wrap dress, his father already beaming. "Oh, Emily, this place is beautiful," she said, kissing my cheek. "You two really outdid yourselves," his dad added. We sat around a long table, menus already waiting, soft music playing in the background. Conversation flowed easily. Laughter came freely. Then came the question I'd been dreading. "So," Daniel's mother said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, "where are your parents, dear?" The table went quiet for half a beat too long. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Daniel reached for my hand and squeezed. "Let's not push that today," he said with a gentle smile. There was something in his tone that made everyone nod in quiet understanding. And just like that, I wasn't alone in my silence. For the rest of the evening, his parents asked me about my job, about how Daniel and I met, about the little boutique bakery I secretly dreamed of opening one day. They listened. Really listened. And not once did I feel like I had to shrink myself to fit their expectations. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. After dinner, we walked to our car under the soft light of the city. Daniel opened the door for me, but I paused. "I really thought they would at least pretend to care," I said, barely above a whisper. "I know," he replied, brushing a curl from my face. "But we're not doing this for them." We drove home in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't press or demand. It just holds. Later that night, I sat on the bed in my robe, knees pulled up to my chest. Daniel was brushing his teeth in the bathroom, humming off-key. I stared at the phone, still half hoping a message might come through. An apology, a change of heart. Nothing. When he came out, I looked up at him. "What if we just didn't invite them at all?" "To the wedding," I nodded. He didn't even blink. "Then we invite the people who love you. That's all that matters." A slow smile tugged at my lips. "That's all that matters," I repeated. And just like that, we decided. No big venue, no seating charts, just a ceremony for us and the people who'd already proven they deserved a place in our lives. I picked up my phone and texted Amber, my best friend since high school, the one who'd helped me move out after Lauren accidentally threw away half my clothes freshman year of college. Getting married. Small wedding. Only people who actually love us invited. "You in?" Her reply came within 30 seconds. "Hell, yes, I'm already crying." Then Daniel texted Julian, his childhood friend who once drove 6 hours to help him fix a busted water heater during a snowstorm. "Need your best man's speech ready in 3 weeks." "You in?" Julian's reply, "I'll bring tissues." "For you, not me." I laughed. For the first time in days, it wasn't bitter, it was real. The forest glen looked like something out of a dream. Golden sunlight slipping between branches, dappling the ground in warm, flickering patterns. There was no aisle, no altar, just a circle of friends standing barefoot in the leaves, each holding a small sprig of wildflowers we'd asked them to bring from their own gardens. Nothing about it was traditional, and yet every bit of it felt exactly right. I stood beneath a canopy of maple trees in a gown I had altered myself, lace and tulle, soft and simple, with the faintest shimmer when I moved. I'd stayed up 3 nights in a row sewing the bodice tighter after stress had whittled me down. But in the mirror that morning, I saw something in myself I hadn't in years. Clarity. Daniel waited a few steps ahead, dressed in a slate gray vest and tie, his smile unshakable. When the music began, just a quiet guitar played by Julian, he turned to face me, and his eyes said everything I had ever hoped to hear from my own family. "You ready?" Amber whispered beside me, squeezing my hand. I nodded. More than I ever was for them. We walked forward together. The ceremony was short, honest. Daniel wrote his vows the night before, and I had seen him crying quietly in the living room, rewriting them again and again until they felt just right. He spoke about building a life not out of obligation, but choice. About being seen, not just loved, but understood. And I knew he was thinking of all the times I came home from my parents' house a little smaller than I left. When it was my turn, I held his hands and said, "I used to think family was something you're born into, but now I know it's the people who show up. The ones who stand beside you even when the rest of the world walks away." There wasn't a dry eye in that clearing. We kissed. And just like that, I was married. No church, no grand announcements, no parents beaming in the front row, but somehow it felt fuller than any ceremony I'd ever dreamed. At the reception, which was just a long picnic table strung with fairy lights and draped in mismatched linen runners, Amber stood to give a toast. She raised her glass and looked right at me. "To chosen family," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "To people who see your light even when others pretend it doesn't exist. And to Emily, who finally got what she deserves." Everyone clapped and cheered, but I just sat there blinking, because the words hit somewhere deep, somewhere still bruised. I wasn't used to being celebrated, not like this. Julian chimed in with a speech that made everyone laugh and cry in equal parts, talking about Daniel's obsession with overcooked pasta and how he knew the man had truly fallen in love when he started eating Emily's quinoa salads without complaint. There were no photographers, no fancy planners, just laughter, soft music, and the smell of pine needles and lemon cake drifting through the air. At one point, I wandered a few steps away from the table, barefoot in the grass, and looked up at the trees swaying overhead. For a moment, it was just me and the sky, and I let myself feel it. The joy, the sorrow, the quiet grief of absence, and the louder gratitude for presence. Daniel came up behind me, slipping his arms around my waist. "Penny, for your thoughts." "I never imagined this," I said. "Not like this, but it's perfect." He kissed my temple. "I'm glad they didn't come." I turned to look at him, surprised. "Because if they had," he continued, "you'd still be trying to win them over, instead of seeing you already had everything worth winning." I leaned into his chest and closed my eyes. He was right. I had been chasing something that never existed, approval wrapped in conditions, love with strings. But here, now, under the trees and surrounded by real affection, I finally understood. You don't need a crowd to feel seen. You just need the right ones clapping. The week after the wedding passed in a kind of golden haze. There were no honeymoon tickets, no white sand beaches or Instagram-perfect getaways, just lazy mornings in bed with coffee, slow dances in the kitchen, and long walks through the neighborhood holding hands like teenagers. I kept catching myself smiling for no reason, and when Daniel would ask what I was thinking, I'd just shrug. "I guess this is what peace feels like," I told him once. "I don't recognize it yet." One afternoon, Daniel got a call from his aunt in Asheville. I watched him nod, mumble something about paperwork, then slowly sit down on the edge of the couch. When he hung up, I raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" He looked at me, stunned. "My grandmother's house. It's ours now." I blinked. "What do you mean, ours?" "She left it to me. The will just cleared. The house, the land, everything, it's all ours if we want it." We sat in silence, the air suddenly thick with possibility. Asheville, a small mountain town where people still left fresh vegetables on their neighbors' porches and waved from porches like something out of a postcard. I'd only visited once years ago, but the way Daniel talked about his childhood summers there always made it sound like magic. "You want to go?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the city skyline. Atlanta had always been my home, and also the place where I'd spent so much of my life shrinking, apologizing, waiting for something to shift within the four walls of a family that never truly saw me. I turned back to him. "Yes," I said. "Let's go." We packed slowly over the next couple of weeks. Every drawer I opened came with its own memory, some sweet, some sour. I donated things I once clung to. I boxed up my handmade cake stands and tiny baking tools like I was preserving a version of myself I didn't need to carry anymore but still wanted to honor. Daniel handled the lease break, the utilities, the route planning. I handled the goodbyes. Amber cried when I told her. "I'm gonna miss you, you know," she said, pulling me into a hug so tight it made my ribs ache. "But I think you're finally walking towards something that feels like you." On our last night in the apartment, we ordered greasy takeout and sat on the living room floor surrounded by half-packed boxes. "It's weird," I said between bites of sesame noodles. "I don't feel scared, just ready." Daniel clinked his soda can against mine. "To a new chapter." We left at sunrise. Windows down, music low, the wind tugging at my hair. As the city faded behind us and the mountains rose ahead, I breathed deeper than I had in years. It wasn't just distance, it was clarity. We reached Asheville just as the sky turned a peachy gold. The farmhouse sat at the top of a hill, wrapped in ivy and weathered wood, with white shutters that creaked in the breeze and a porch wide enough for morning coffee and big dreams. I stepped out of the car and felt it before I even touched the door. This was home. That first night, we didn't unpack. We laid out blankets on the living room floor, lit candles from our wedding, and fell asleep listening to crickets and wind and the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full. Over the next few days, we cleaned, repaired, repainted. I planted herbs in mismatched pots and labeled them with hand-painted signs. Basil, thyme, forgiveness. Daniel started sketching designs for a little woodworking shed out back. There were no voices telling me who to be. No sharp jokes or passive-aggressive advice over dinner. Just the sound of our own lives beginning. I was finally choosing my life, not asking permission for it. It started as a practical trip. Just a few boxes of childhood things, I told myself. Old photo albums, some vintage cookbooks, maybe the ceramic jewelry box my grandma gave me when I was 10. Things not worth arguing over, but worth remembering. Daniel offered to come, but I told him no. "It's just a quick in and out," I said. "I'll be fine." He gave me that look, concern laced with trust, and let it be. Driving back toward Atlanta was like slipping into a sweater 2 sizes too small. Everything looked familiar, but nothing fit right anymore. The streets felt narrower, the sky a little heavier. I pulled into my parents' driveway just past noon. Their house sat exactly as I remembered. Same trimmed hedges, same hanging ferns on the porch, even the chipped "Welcome Friends" sign Lauren painted in middle school. Mom greeted me at the door with a half-smile, as if unsure whether we were pretending everything was fine. "We saved some of your things in the attic," she said. "Just take what you want." No hug. No questions about the wedding. I nodded, slipping past her into the foyer, pretending not to feel the sting. The attic stairs creaked like old secrets. Dust swirled in the stale air as I pulled the light cord and stepped inside. Boxes were stacked in messy rows, some labeled in faded Sharpie. Baby clothes. High school, junk. I opened one, found my childhood ballet slippers. Another held old yearbooks, notes from friends I hadn't seen in over a decade. I was about to seal it up when I noticed a small chest tucked behind the insulation rolls near the far wall. Not a box. A chest. Locked, but old. The kind that gives if you jiggle it just right. I knelt, fingers tracing the tarnished latch, and gave it a nudge. It popped open with a sigh. Inside were random scraps, an old snow globe, tangled necklaces, a cracked music box that no longer played. But beneath them, a thick envelope. My heart stopped. It wasn't sealed, just folded shut with twine. The rustic kind I'd used on the wedding invitations. My hands started trembling as I pulled it out. Inside were pieces of paper, torn, crumpled, some with tiny dried petals still clinging to them. I knew the design instantly. My invitations. Dozens of them shredded, destroyed, stuffed away like something shameful. It wasn't that they'd never received them, they had. And someone had made sure they disappeared. I sat there in the dust and insulation, holding the proof of what I'd only suspected. Lauren. She hadn't just dismissed me. She had stolen the moment before I ever got to live it. She took my invitations and destroyed them, not one or two, all of them. My heart pounded in my ears. Rage, betrayal, and that familiar, suffocating ache twisted through my chest like smoke. I wanted to scream, to run, to cry. But instead, I took the evidence, every scrap I could find, and slid them into a new manila envelope. I pulled a notepad from the nearby box and scribbled a single line. "Found in the attic. Ask Lauren." I carried the envelope downstairs like it was fragile glass. Mom was in the kitchen, humming softly as if her world hadn't just cracked open. I didn't say a word, just placed the envelope on the table and walked away. Dinner was already being set. Roast beef, potatoes, the usual. Lauren showed up just before 6, breezing in like she always did, loud, laughing, already halfway through a story before she even dropped her purse on the counter. She looked me up and down, then grinned. "Still solo at 35, she quipped. I sat down slowly, unfolded my napkin, and placed it in my lap. "No," I said calmly. "Actually, I'm married and moving with my husband." For a full 10 seconds after I said it, no one moved. Forks hovered above plates. The soft clink of a serving spoon dropping into the mashed potatoes was the only sound in the room. Lauren blinked. Mom's head jerked toward me so fast I thought she might get whiplash. "What husband?" she asked, her voice sharp, too sharp to mask the confusion or the rising fear underneath. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out the manila envelope, and set it gently on the table. "This," I said, "is what I sent you, invitations, handmade, with dried flowers I picked myself. Daniel and I spent weeks planning that dinner. And this," I tapped the envelope, voice steady now, "is what was found in the attic today." Lauren's face paled. Her fork slipped from her fingers and hit the plate with a loud, accusatory clatter. Mom looked at the envelope like it might explode. "What is this?" I pushed it across the table. "I'd open it," I said. With shaking fingers, Mom peeled it open and began pulling out the torn pieces. A dried sprig of lavender drifted down like snow. Her eyes scanned the petals, the familiar cardstock, the twine. She gasped. "Emily, these are your invitations." I nodded. "The ones you said you never received. The ones Lauren told me weren't your kind of thing." Lauren let out a breathy laugh, too forced. "Oh, come on, that could have been from anything. Who even keeps this kind of trash?" "You did," I said. "You shredded every single one and hid them in a chest in the attic. I recognized the twine and the handwriting." Dad finally looked up, his eyes searching the table, his daughter, then his wife. "This can't be right," he murmured. "There must be a mistake." "There's no mistake," I said, voice steel now. "She made sure you didn't come, and you believed whatever story she told you without even checking with me." Mom looked at Lauren. "Is that true?" Lauren's face twisted, like she was calculating how to spin it, how to lie her way through the fire. But she didn't get the chance, because something in her cracked. I didn't want to be left out again," she muttered, voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was not the calm kind. It was the kind that presses against your skin. That hurts. "I've always been second to her," Lauren said, pointing a shaking finger at me now. "Always the one chasing, always the one ignored unless I was loud or funny or cruel." She blinked rapidly, eyes shiny but wild. "And then she finds this perfect guy, starts baking flowers into paper and acting like Miss Martha Stewart of emotional healing, and I just couldn't take it." I stared at her. It was the closest thing I'd ever get to an apology, but it wasn't enough. Not for what she took. Mom put a hand over her mouth, tears brimming. "Lauren, how could you?" "I didn't want her to get everything," Lauren snapped, all her veneer gone now. "I thought if they didn't come, maybe the whole thing would fall apart and I'd finally get to be the one who had it together for once." Dad leaned back like the air had been sucked out of the room. "We missed your engagement dinner." "You missed my wedding," I said quietly. "You missed it all." Mom looked devastated. "Emily, you thought wrong." I cut in, sharper than I'd ever been with her. "You've always thought wrong, and you never once stopped to ask why I always felt invisible next to her." Lauren opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "No, you don't get to talk now." She froze. "I spent most of my life thinking I had to earn your love," I said, turning toward our parents now. "That if I was just quieter or more agreeable or more like Lauren, you'd finally see me." I stood slowly, placing my napkin on the table with care. "But I don't need your version of love anymore. I've built a life with someone who sees me without needing me to prove my worth." Dad's voice cracked. "You're leaving again." "I never really came back," I said. "I came to collect what was mine. That includes my dignity." I turned toward the door. "Emily, wait," Mom called, standing. I stopped. Just once. "You allowed this favoritism all my life," I said, voice low, almost gentle now. "You don't get to ask me to stay." And I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry in the car. I just breathed, slow and even, until the last streetlight faded behind me and the road opened wide. By the time I pulled into our gravel driveway, dusk had already settled over the mountains like a worn quilt. The trees rustled softly. The farmhouse windows glowed golden. And for a moment, I just sat in the car and breathed. The manila envelope rested on the passenger seat beside me. I'd kept it not out of spite, but as proof. Not for them, for me, that I wasn't crazy, that I didn't imagine the betrayal. I had lived through it, named it, survived it. The porch light flickered on as Daniel stepped outside, wiping his hands on a towel. "You're home," he said, smiling like he always did, like I was exactly who he'd been waiting for. "I'm home," I said, finally letting the words mean something. He opened his arms and I walked right into them, the tension that had curled around my spine the entire drive finally dissolving into the night air. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He just kissed the side of my head and said, "Let's make tea." We sat on the porch, wrapped in mismatched blankets, sipping chamomile with honey. The stars above Asheville twinkled brighter than anything I ever saw back in Atlanta. "I told them," I said after a while. "Everything. About the invitations. About the wedding. About Lauren." Daniel didn't respond right away, just nodded slowly, giving me space. "She admitted it," I continued. "Said she was tired of being second best." He looked over at me, eyes soft. "And you?" "I told them they don't get to ask me to stay now, not after a lifetime of watching me disappear." Daniel reached for my hand under the blanket and held it tight. "I'm proud of you," he said simply, and I believed him. The next few days were quiet. We picked apples from the trees behind the house and baked a pie that collapsed in the middle but tasted like something from heaven. I labeled more herb jars and started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. It felt like finding an old version of myself I thought I'd buried beneath the weight of other people's opinions. Each morning, I woke up feeling a little lighter, a little more mine. Then, a week later, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in my mother's neat, looping script. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. "Emily, I read your words, and for once I truly heard them. I won't lie to you, I was shocked. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe Lauren wouldn't do such a thing. But the truth is, I let her get away with too much for too long, because it was easier. Because she demanded the kind of attention I didn't know how to give you. But you were always the one with quiet strength. And I see now how unfair it was to expect you to carry the weight of our denial. I'm sorry for not protecting your light, for not celebrating you the way I should have, and for missing the most important day of your life. It's too late to undo that. But I hope, one day, you'll let me know who you've become, because she sounds like someone I'd be proud to know. Love, Mom." I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the back of my journal. Not out of sentiment, but because it mattered in a way that was honest. Not everything broken needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be acknowledged, and sometimes closure looks like someone finally saying the words you stopped needing years ago. That evening, I walked barefoot through the backyard while Daniel watered the tomatoes. The breeze carried the scent of basil and rain-soaked earth. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I think I finally believe I'm allowed to be." He smiled. "Good, because this version of you. She's kind of incredible." I laughed, soft and real. "She's been hiding for a long time." He walked over and kissed me, gentle, patient, sure. "Well, I'm glad she found her way home." We watched the sun set behind the mountains in silence. No expectations, no performance, just two people who chose each other over and over. And somewhere deep inside, I let the final remnants of guilt fall away, because I hadn't lost my family. I had outgrown the roles they gave me. And in doing so, I'd found something better. A life that wasn't about proving myself, but becoming myself. A year passed. 12 whole months since I stood in that candle-lit kitchen, swallowing my pride like warm wine as my sister cracked jokes that sliced deep. It feels like a lifetime ago now, like someone else's memory I just happened to carry. This morning, I sat on our porch in Asheville, wrapped in Daniel's flannel shirt, sipping coffee from a chipped ceramic mug we found at a yard sale. The mountain air was brisk, laced with pine and something soft like promise. Daniel was in the garden, sleeves rolled up, humming while he planted thyme next to the basil. He waved when he caught me watching, and I smiled, resting my cheek against the mug. He never needed me to be anything but myself. Our little farmhouse is still a work in progress. Some days it smells like fresh paint and others like burnt toast. But it's ours. Every creaky floorboard, every uneven cabinet, every book stacked sideways on shelves we still haven't mounted. It's a mess, but it's a chosen mess. And that makes all the difference. I keep my wedding dress in the back of the closet, wrapped in linen, not because I need to look at it, but because I remember what it felt like to wear it. Not the fabric, not the lace. The freedom. The moment I finally stepped into the center of my own life and said, "This is mine." Amber visits every couple of months, bringing fresh gossip and overpriced cheese. Julian texts us bad puns and sends pictures of woodworking disasters. And Daniel's parents still call me every Sunday, always ending with "We love you, sweetheart," and they mean it. Every time. As for my parents, we haven't spoken much. There were a few texts, a birthday card, a blurry photo of a Christmas tree with "thinking of you" scribbled underneath, and the letter, the one Mom sent after everything. I read it once, then I read it again. I didn't write back, not because I'm angry, but because some wounds don't bleed, they calcify, they shape you. You don't owe those who made them your forgiveness on a deadline. You owe yourself the right to heal on your own terms. Sometimes, closure isn't a door swinging shut. It's you deciding you don't need to knock anymore. I still wonder sometimes what would have happened if Lauren had never found those invitations. If my parents had shown up to that dinner. If they'd smiled and clapped and said, "We're happy for you." Would it have changed anything? Maybe, but maybe not, because the lesson wasn't about them showing up. It was about me not shrinking when they didn't. And I didn't, not this time. I stood up. I spoke. I walked away not in anger, but in truth. That's the part no one ever tells you about choosing yourself. It doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with silence. But it's in that quiet that you finally hear your own voice, clear and unshaken. The sun crested over the trees, golden and forgiving. Daniel waved me over, his hands covered in soil, his grin crooked and familiar. I stepped off the porch and walked toward him, barefoot, unburdened home. Some people have to lose you to finally see you. But when you finally see yourself, that's when everything changes. If you've ever been the quiet one, the overlooked sibling, the person who gave and gave until you disappeared, know this, you are not alone. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from someone who refused to see your worth? Where are you now? Who are you becoming? Let's talk about it below. And don't forget, you deserve the life you choose, not the one others choose for you.